Hello, this is Professor Ramsey again, and what we're doing today is a discussion of Six Sigma projects and charters. Recall from our previous section, I mentioned that Six Sigma is fundamentally a project-oriented continuous improvement program. So let me go ahead and put us on slideshow. And as I have said in the past, these notes are called project charters, and it is not my intent to cover every detail, so I leave it to the students to read through the notes and get into some of the detail that I'm not necessarily going to discuss today. Okay. So again, if you're going to do a Six Sigma project, let's call it a Greenbelt project to be specific, what are the things that we need to do? I was just getting some sort of a message from the integrity recording. You might have heard it. What are the elements? One, obviously the project should have some reason for being done. We often say important to business, but it could be whatever important to the organization that sponsoring the project. And it typically is trying to fill some gap between the current performance and some desired level of performance. Sometimes they use the somewhat cliched term, a pain point, some point of pain for the organization. Number three is kind of important. The cause of the problem isn't already known. So if you've already decided and have confirmed that you know the root cause or causes of a problem, then that's not a project. Six Sigma is about projects where we don't know the causes and we try to find them. Okay. And number four is also important. The solution is not known. A Six Sigma project is not a vehicle for implementing a known solution. In Six Sigma, to be a project, we do not know the causes of the problem and we do not know a solution. So the project finds causes and then we find solutions. And basically, Six Sigma projects are about improving some existing process. So if there's a need for design, then we use what's called design for Six Sigma. So we're focused on continuous improvement projects. Okay. So one of the things when you set up a project that's important is called the charter. This is a concept borrowed from project management training. And basically a charter is a bit like a contract. It says this is what the team will do, and it is developed such that both all team members and the sponsor of the project are in agreement. And there are basically five elements of the charter: a business case or organizational case, that is, why are we doing this project? A problem statement or opportunity. What exactly will the team address in the project? A goal statement. We'll say more about these in specifically. This states what the team will do, and it also specifies how the team will measure their performance, and it's called a key process or key performance indicator, KPI. You also have to scope the project. One of the reasons projects often fail is the scope is nebulous and often hopelessly too big for what can realistically be done. And then typically there's a list of the team members, sponsor, black belt, and so forth. Okay, so this is a simple template for a charter. There's variations of these. There's not just one set form. But again, you lay out the pieces of it, the business case, the problem opportunity statement, the goals of the project, and the key performance indicator, and the project scope. Okay, so here's an example. This is a typical type of Six Sigma project. This one is dealing with the on-time delivery of goods. And what they want is 95%. They're currently at 92%. Poor on-time delivery has led to expedited shipments, which cost money, customer complaints, and even sometimes economic penalties. The problem, and it states from March 1st of 2006 to February 28th, 2007, on-time delivery for product, so they're being very specific here, ABC was 82%, and this resulted in a cost of $235,000 in expedited costs and customer penalties. Now, when we take a look at the goal statement, notice they're stating specifically what they're going to do. They're going to increase the on-time delivery rate for product ABC from 82% to 95% by September 2007. In stating a goal, you should state it in terms of moving from this level to the desired level. You should be as specific as possible. And notice they have also laid out the key performance or process indicator. They will track proportion of on-time delivery measured on a monthly basis. And then notice the project scope, and this is really important. They're stating specifically what they will do. Product ABC only, and it will not include version 2, and it's limited to customers in the US and Mexico. You need to be very specific in these projects. The tendency is to make them much too big, to be honest with you. And notice they have put together a simple project plan in terms of milestones and so forth. You may or may not add that. Many people like to put at least benchmarks or milestones, which they hope to have tasks completed. So again, the opportunity and KPI statements. Many people like to do these first. I don't particularly care, but it does make sense to clearly lay out originally what the problem in the KPI is. Notice this one is the business case. We'll get to this in a moment, but EPI strategic goals, and that's an initialism, and I've forgotten exactly what it means. This was based on an actual project. So make sure you get the opportunity and the problem clearly stated and the goals in KPI. This often, especially the goals in the KPI, often take time. And it will take time to converge on those goals and then figure out how to measure performance. Remember, if you have a goal and you're not actually measuring your performance of the process before and after you implement an improvement, there's virtually no way to prove you actually achieved your goals. So KPIs measure performance before and then after, and you're hoping for improvement. Okay. And also in the opportunity statement, by the way, that's often where people will put economic benefits. In other words, what's the opportunity, and put it into some sort of economic metric, although it's not necessarily, it really depends on the project. But in many organizations, cost savings are important, and the people viewing the project and reviewing it will want to see, what do we gain by spending the resources to do this project? Okay. And again, a high-level business case and metric like on-time delivery or something is usually included. And again, it could be, make it the organizational case. Why are we doing the project? Okay. Again, KPIs are important, and you're going to find often they take a lot of thought because you need to be able to specifically measure performance. So in picking a KPI, it should be as directly focused on the process performance as possible. Okay, often If the KPI is fuzzy, you're going to have a hard time demonstrating that your project was actually a success. Okay. Project scope, be very clear about what you are addressing. Again, most projects fail because the scope is far too broad and too ambitious, and it's simply impossible to actually complete it. Okay. So in terms of goals, basically, it's obvious it should be meaningful, it should be specific. The problem is measurable. In other words, you have to be sure that you have some way of measuring the current state and hopefully the future state after you've made improvements. Without this, it's very hard, as I said, to show that you've actually accomplished anything. And generally, we like goals to be challenging. Don't be too conservative, but also be reasonable. What can we reasonably achieve in, say, 3 to 6 months, typical length of a Six Sigma project? And you have to be sure that the sponsor of the project and the team are all in agreement on what the goals are to be. And a few things to remember about the goal statement itself is, again, to be very clear, something that is reasonable, that can be doable. It has to be measurable. And typically we measure the improvement in terms of a key performance or process indicator. Okay. One of the things you should avoid here is using a financial or economic measure. For instance, we want to reduce cost of some material from X to Y by some a period of time. The problem is there are many things that influence cost that can be entirely outside the scope or control of the team. So when you pick a goal in a KPI, it should be something that you have hope of controlling and can directly measure. So we often say financials and economic benefits should go in the problem opportunity area in the business case. Again, there's so many things that influence financial measures that are beyond your control. They typically do not make good KPIs or project goals. Okay, and this slide is just some typical types of KPIs, and you can read those when you have a chance. Again, a KPI, this is actually really critical. I've worked on projects myself over the years where it was hard to tell if we were making progress or when the project might even be completed because the project leader failed to establish clear goals and we had no real key performance indicator. So we might have done some good. In some cases, I suspect we did, but it wasn't measured. Nor do we come up with anything that was measurable to show success. Okay. Typically, in terms of key performance indicators, one or two, I prefer one so that it's focused, an overall measure of performance, sometimes two if they're closely related, and then again, don't state KPIs in terms of financials. Okay. Project scope. Again, this is where many projects fail right in the beginning. Okay. So make sure you get the scope right. Okay. We like to say, don't get into the boil the ocean syndrome, as people say in project management. In other words, you take on this big, ambitious project, and sooner or later, you end up swamped, going nowhere, going in circles. So be very clear about the boundaries of the project. Okay. And that has to be agreed upon again by the sponsor of the project and the team. Okay. Now, how can we refine your project? So we've talked about things like particularly the goal statement, the KPI, and again, the scope. So goals, KPI, and scope, probably the three key elements of the charter. So I'm just going to briefly discuss a few tools that can be used to help you with these parts of the charter. Again, there are other parts of these notes that you're responsible for in terms of reading, but I'm hitting what I think are the most important parts of the project. Okay. One of the ways in writing a goal statement, and this can work in many different scenarios, but let's focus on the goal statement. One way to start is to have each person say, write a goal statement. By the way, you could do this for the problem statement if you wanted to, but specifically for the goal statement, I find this works pretty well. Have each person on the team write their own goal statement. It says 15 words. That basically means we're not looking for somebody to write pages and pages. Keep it succinct. Be concise and succinct. Okay. So basically, each person writes a goal statement, and essentially, you go through the statements as a group, clarify them, and then at some point, you come together to put together some consensus of a final goal statement. Okay. Now, another tool that I like has to do with scoping the project. It's called in and out of frame, and it is actually based on the idea, at least figuratively, of a picture frame. Okay. So again, this is another tool that can be used in many scenarios, but I find it very useful when people are trying to put together their specific scope. The idea is really simple. Think of a picture frame. So items you put within the frame are in scope. Things that you put outside of the frame are out of scope. And then things that still need to be thought about are put on the edges of the frame. So as a team, you sit there and often, literally, you could just draw this frame on a whiteboard, and then you could use things like Post-it notes. And people write down the things they should be in scope and should not. And it just gives you a nice way to summarize the information and work together to try to come to a final agreement on what is in scope. Okay. There are different variants of these, by the way, this in and out of frame. Another one, I don't have a good way to show you. Perhaps I could just draw it for you. I don't have it in the notes, but it's one that can be used. Another one, I'll just write it on this frame. You draw a T, okay, okay. So one side is in, and get this to work right. In, the other is out. Same idea. So things that are in, you put on the left, things that are out are on the right. And if you're not sure, put them right in the middle of the T. So this is another variant. I kind of like the in and out of frame, but I've seen many people like to just use this, what we call it a T chart, the in and out type of chart. And again, these things are applicable to many group activities where you have to come to some consensus. So in frame, out of frame, 15 words. These are just nice, useful tools to help a team or group reach consensus on whatever the particular issue might be. And then finally, in refining the project charter, often it's good to step back and identify the keys to success. Okay, what are the things that are important for this project to succeed? Okay, so that's kind of obvious. I'll just leave it at that. And this ends my discussion of the project charter. It is important, and I will give you an exercise, say in homework, on writing a charter. As I said, many projects that I've been associated with that don't succeed fail because they never put together a realistic project charter, if they did it at all. And I find projects that have a good solid charter have a very good chance of success.